Okay, this is the last section. This is part 4 of our lesson 13 on page 20. So part 4 is talking about multiplying and dividing fractions. When we multiply fractions, we multiply tops, which are numerators, together. So we will do top to top, and then we will do bottom to bottom. And our last step is always reduce our fractions. So 3 steps. 1, 2, and 3. And number 3 is reducing. We always have to reduce. So we have to remember our dividing rules. If it's an even number, we divide by 2. Odd numbers, we start dividing by 3. If 3 doesn't work, then we go to 5, then 7, then 9. If we have one that's odd, one that's even, we start dividing by 3s. If something ends in a 5, we divide by 5s. So here's our first example. So we have 2 separate numbers. We have a 3 over 4 times a 2 over 3. So we're showing top times top, bottom times bottom. And that's what they're showing in this step right here. Okay, so you're going to take your top times your top, bottom times your bottom. And then our last step is to reduce. They are both even. So I would divide by 2. That's going to give me 3 over 4. 3 over 6. And then I would divide by 3, and that's going to give me 1 over 2. So there's 2 ways you can do it. They found a bigger number. They found the number 6. So number 6, it's going to divide evenly to both numbers. But since it's an even number, like I said, you can start dividing by 2. And then the next number, still reduce more. Divide it again. Keep going as low as you can. Second question, same idea. We're going to multiply top numbers and we're going to multiply bottom numbers. Top times top, bottom times bottom. And again, we're going to reduce our answers. So at this point, we reduce. And if it ends in a 0 or a 5, what do we know we can divide by? 5. Good. So that's what they're dividing by here. They're dividing by 5s because they end in 0s and 5s. So this here is my final answer. Okay, final answer. All right, the next one. It says Paige is reading a very thick book. She was 3/4 of the way through, so 75% of the way through. If she read half of the remaining pages in one night, how much would she have left to read? So you want to find half of 1/4. The word of in math means multiplying. Okay, so the word sum in math means adding, difference or minus means subtracting, of means multiplying. So I want 1/2 of 1/4. So that means I'm taking and I'm multiplying top to top, bottom to bottom. That's going to give me 1 over 8. That means she has 1 out of 8 parts left to read of her book. She has 1/8 left to read. Okay, turn your page, please. If it's a mixed number, what is the first thing you need to do if it's a mixed number? You need to convert them to impropers. So always convert to improper fractions first. Okay, make sure you're writing these little hints down, guys. So we're always going to convert to improper fractions first. So that means we're going to loop, times, and add. So this one here, we would loop, times it, and add it, loop it, times it, and add it. So they've converted into improper fractions. So if I were to convert my improper fractions, after I've converted them, you go back to your multiplying rules. Top times top, bottom times bottom, and then reduce your answer. So let's do the next one. It says Nora saw jeans that were on sale 1/3 off the regular price. So we want 1/3 of 24. Now, 24 is a whole number. We could put whole numbers into fractions by putting a 1 on the bottom. So you can put any number into a fraction by putting a 1 on its bottom, and you can make any number into a decimal by going 0.0 at the end. Okay? So the word of again means timesing. So we're going to times top to top, bottom to bottom. We're going to get 24 over 3. Sometimes when we divide them, we get no more fraction. Sometimes we get an actual whole number answer. And in this case, we get a whole number answer of 8. And we're talking money, so she will save $8. Okay, letter C. Nikita has a novel to read for her English class. It has 175 pages. She must have 2/3 of the book read by next week. So how many pages does she need to read? Well, again, we have one number that's not a fraction. So we're going to go over 1 to make it into a fraction. Then we're going to multiply top to top, bottom to bottom, and then divide. Top to top, and our last step here is going to be dividing. That's what that fraction line means. It means dividing. So 350 divided by 3 is going to give us 117 when we round it up. So she has roughly 117 pages to read. All right, so that's multiplying. Multiplying is top times top, bottom times bottom. Here's our last section of our fraction unit, and this is dividing. What we actually do for dividing, we never ever divide fractions. Instead, we flip and times. What that means is reciprocate and multiply. That's what that means. So flip means to reciprocate something. So if I've got a fraction, I want to flip it, that's called reciprocating. Timesing in math means multiplying. Okay, so timesing in math means multiplying. Okay, so it says a reciprocal is a fraction that is written upside down. So it has flipped upside down. It says the numerator becomes the bottom and the bottom becomes the top. So here are reciprocals. All I've done, if I want to create a reciprocal, is I've flipped the top and bottom. Okay, they have turned upside down, and that's what they become their reciprocal. Now, if I take and I multiply those, whenever you multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, you're going to get an answer of 1. What happens if I times any number by 1? It's the same number, exactly. So the number doesn't change. So since the number doesn't change, I'm not changing the value of my answer, which is why we're allowed to do it. So whenever we are dividing fractions, you see a divide sign. Guys, watch carefully, please. When we see a divide sign, we're going to stop. We're going to write the first fraction, and then we're going to flip the second one. So it's the fraction that comes after the divide sign. It's the one that flips upside down. So that means this is the one that's going to flip upside down. The 3 over 4 doesn't flip. Okay, your first fraction stays the same. So my very first fraction right here, 3 over 4, stays 3 over 4. My second fraction is the one that's flipping upside down. And then we change our divide to a times. And then all we're doing is back to multiply rules. So top to top, bottom to bottom. So now we take a look at our numbers, and we're going to have top times top, bottom times bottom, which is going to give me a 6 over 4, which is what they're showing right here. And then always reduce. Okay, so we reduce our answer. So 6 and 4 are even. So 6 over 4, these are even numbers. So that means I'm going to start by dividing by 2. and that's going to reduce. So that'll give me a 3 over 2 as my final answer. So this becomes 3 over 2. Now they're showing me as this, as a mixed number. Well, how would I draw that? Well, if I were to draw that object, that tells me I have rectangles that are divided into two. It tells me I have one of them that is fully shaded in. And then it tells me that I have another one that only has one part shaded. And if I count now, that gives me 3 over 2. So I've got 3 pieces shaded and one object is divided into 2. So that's what that's showing me right there. All right, let's try some dividing questions. Remember, if it's a divide, we don't divide, we flip and times. So let's take a look at B. It says, Seth is planning a high school band trip. He packed 6 bags of his favorite snacks. If he eats half of every bag each day, how long are his snacks going to last? Well, let's take a look. He's got 6 bags of snacks. He is going to take 6 and divide it by a half. So that's what they're showing. 6 divided by 1/2. Now, the rule is we don't divide. We turn the divide sign to a timesing. And the number after flips upside down. So that means I'm going to take 6 times 2 and 1 times 1. That's going to give me 12 over 1, which is just 12. So that means his snacks would last for 12 days if he only ate half of a bag each day. Okay? All right, what about if we use diagrams? So what happens if we use a diagram? It says 1/2 is divided by 1/4. So it says our first diagram represents a rectangle that's cut in 2 parts. Okay, I've got a blue part and a white part. Those are my half. Then it says separate them into 4. So all they did was chop them down the middle. That's all they did. And that cut them into 4 pieces. Now it says, now look at the new parts. There's 2 squares that are shaded in the new diagram. And the bottom number would be a 4. So if we divide them, 1/2 divided by 1/4, we are multiplying. So we flip the second number. We turn this guy to a times, and then times top to top, bottom to bottom. That's giving us our 4 over 2, which divides evenly and gives us 2. That tells me that there's 2 squares shaded out of 4 in my final answer. Okay? So 2 out of 4 in my final. All right, last couple examples, and then we're done this lesson and done this section on fractions. Yay! So now we're going to divide 2 out of 3 by 1 out of 6. So that means I draw my first shape. So my first shape is drawn, 2 out of 3. So my 2 out of 3 is the first shape. My first set of rectangles. I have 3 rectangles. I shaded 2 blue. 1 is not shaded. Then it says I'm dividing by 1 over 6. What that means is we have to cut this object into 6 parts. So if I'm going to cut it into 6 parts, I would cut it down the middle. That gives me 3 on the left, 3 on the right. So I have a total of 6 equal parts. Now I see how many of those parts are shaded. I've got 4 out of 6 shaded parts. Okay? So if I were to divide them and I say, okay, if I'm dividing this, what does it divide into? That's going to give you 4 shaded objects. Okay? So we're just worried about how many are shaded. That's what we're worried about in the end, is how much do we have shaded in our final diagram. What if it's a mixed number? Mixed numbers always convert to impropers. You cannot deal with mixed numbers unless you're adding or subtracting. So that means we convert to mixed numbers always. Okay, so these guys convert to mixed numbers. Then you do your dividing rules, which means flip, and times. So this guy converts, and then this guy's going to flip upside down, and we turn this one to a times. Okay? And that's going to give us our final answer. I'm going to multiply top to top, bottom to bottom. That's going to give me 12 over 3. Your final step is always to divide to see if you're going to get an even answer. Do you get an answer that is a whole number, or do you get a decimal? That's your last step, is to divide to get your final answer. This concludes our lesson on multiplying and dividing fractions.